As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So this was reported by the New York Times on Monday that Israel is looking for $10 billion in military aid amid its onslaught in Gaza. And this report said that lawmakers in Congress are working with the White House to craft a spending package that will include military aid for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and additional funds for border security. So it looks like Taiwan is back into the mix. There's been multiple reports about this now. And then on Tuesday, Reuters reported that President Biden will request a spending package for all the military aid for all these three countries worth about $100 billion. Previous reports said that Biden was looking for a massive spending package for Ukraine that would last through the 2024 election. So if Israel gets an extra $10 billion, it would be on top of the $3.8 billion the U.S. provides the country each year. I wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. gives Israel more than it requested. It's not clear what the breakdown is of that $100 billion that they're expecting Biden to ask for. But let's say Israel gets its $10 billion. That's a few years worth of military aid, compared to the $3.8 billion that they get every year. It's just lots of money to continue this brutal campaign in Gaza that the U.S. is giving its full-throated endorsement of. And in the wake of the Hamas attack on southern Israel, and when Israel started this campaign in Gaza, the U.S. started shipping additional military aid so that the U.S. has already provided more support. And when it comes to Ukraine, of course, they're worried that as the year drags on, as we get closer to the 2024 election, opposition to the proxy war is going to grow. So they just want to have a big one and done package to get the vote out of the way. Now, the situation in the House, Jim Jordan did not win the speakership on Tuesday. He couldn't get enough votes. So that's still all up in the air. So it's not clear when the actual vote is going to happen on this aid. So we'll see how it all plays out. And, when it comes to including Taiwan in this bill, that is, I think sends a very provocative message to China, because you're rolling in military aid for Taiwan into a spending package that includes aid to fund two hot wars that are ongoing. And, it's just sending some kind of message to China that the U.S. also thinks they need to throw in weapons for Taiwan into this huge spending package. So on Monday night, the U.S. and its allies voted down a UN Security Council resolution that would have called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, as civilians in the enclave are under a brutal siege. So this resolution was proposed by Russia. It was also supported by China, Gabon, Mozambique, and the UAE. But the U.S., Britain, France, and Japan voted against the resolution. Now, this is the UN Security Council. A lot of this stuff is mainly symbolic, but still the fact that the U.S. and its allies are voting against a humanitarian ceasefire says a lot. And the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, she said that she slammed the resolution because it did not condemn Hamas. She said, quote, "By failing to condemn Hamas, Russia is giving cover to a terrorist group that brutalizes innocent civilians. It is outrageous, hypocritical, and indefensible," end quote. And then Russia's representative, of course, criticized the U.S. and its allies for voting against this resolution. And we know the State Department is telling its diplomats, don't talk about de-escalation, don't talk about a ceasefire. We're backing Israel all the way here. So it's not a surprise. The U.S. secretly gives Ukraine cluster ATACMS. So CNN reported Tuesday that the U.S. has secretly provided Ukraine with Army tactical missile systems. Those are the ATACMS munitions that typically have a range of about 190 miles and can be fired from the HIMARS rocket systems. U.S. officials told the New York Times that the ATACMS the U.S. has provided are armed with cluster bombs. And the issue with cluster bombs is that they can leave behind duds. They spread these small little bomblets, and many of them might not explode. And civilians can often find them years or decades after the conflict. And a lot of times it's children. They see something that looks like a ball, they pick it up, and it blows up in their hands. So that's the fate of Ukrainians in the future, thanks to Joe Biden sending all these cluster bombs over there. So the ATACMS have a range of 190 miles, which is significantly longer than anything else the U.S. has given them. This New York Times report said that this version that the U.S. has secretly provided, though, have less of a range than 190 miles. They say it's even less than the Storm Shadow missiles that the British have provided Kiev that have a range of 155 miles away. So it's not really clear what range these ATACMS are, but either way, this is a big escalation. And they did it secretly. This was not announced in any recent military aid package that the Pentagon announced for Ukraine. So that raises all sorts of questions about What else has the U.S. done secretly when it comes to sending weapons, or what other kind of support are they providing that we don't know about? The article is from Kyle over at the Libertarian Institute. Russian President Vladimir Putin traveled to China to meet with President Xi Jinping as the two countries are developing a historically strong relationship. Xi and Putin described each other as close friends, and these robust ties between Moscow and Beijing grew as the U.S. has been leading, these sanctions against Russia. China's also facing sanctions and a U.S. military buildup in the Asia Pacific. So naturally, the two countries would grow closer together. So she said that the ties between Russia and China are, mutually beneficial. Putin arrived in China on Tuesday for the Belt and Road Forum. In comments to Chinese state media, Putin said, quote, Chairman Xi Jinping calls me his friend and I call him my friend, end quote. Trade between the two nations has increased by 30% over the first 3 quarters of 2023 and is expected to exceed $190 billion for the full year. So that's pretty significant increase in cooperation there.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
Been at this going on 44 years. I look at the current events forming future trends, and we are facing hell on earth. The Ukraine war is out of the news. It's all about the Israel war now. And this is serious. It's serious. You go back to our cover of the Trends Journal last week. It's all failing. Right there. The economy, Ukraine war, judicial reform, Middle East meltdown, refugees, crime, government corruption, violence. When all else fails, they take you to war. So now we got the Israel war going on. And by the way, articles that we had in last week's Trends Journal about how Israel knew about this, you're also seeing articles coming out now from United States top people, Egypt, saying they gave the warnings to Israel that this was going to happen. Again, when all else fails, they take you to war. And one of them we mentioned in last week was judicial reform. The people hated the guy that's playing the prime minister that keeps playing it over and over again, Benjamin Netanyahu, for his judicial reform acts. Not my language, but the language from the Jerusalem Post, Haaretz, Times of Israel. There's a civil war going on in Israel. That's right. 39 weeks in a row, people taking to the streets in opposition of Netanyahu's judicial reform. Hey, all forgotten now. They all united to fight those Palestinians. The Palestinians that have been locked up in an open-air concentration camp for almost 17 years. Can't get in, can't get out. And Ukraine's out of the news. Here's my trend forecast. What they're going to do, because they're not getting the dough they need, it's going to now Israel, as with Biden going there. They're going to launch a false flag attack in Ukraine. That's going to make the headline news to get them back in the news. They may launch an attack on a nuclear power plant. They may launch something very big in Moscow. They're going to do everything they can to get back in the news so people start again supporting Ukraine, as they don't want to do it anymore because now they're all going pro-Israel. Over 500 people died in a Baptist hospital in Gaza. That's right. It's from Yahoo. The horrors of Gaza's humanitarian crisis. Look at this. Okay, now let's take this guy and this girl and let's make them Jewish. And let's make the hospital that they were in not a Baptist hospital, but a Jewish hospital. And Hamas or Palestine bombed it. This would be terror. Oh my God, how terrible. But it's, and by the way, now the propaganda coming out is that no, Israel didn't bomb this hospital. And again, we have all the articles about Israel was doing to telling the people in Gaza to leave, in northern Gaza. The place is 5 miles by 25 miles. There's nowhere to go. You can't get in, you can't get out, and the Egyptians aren't letting them out. And now, and again, all the news is coming out of the people trying to escape that are being bombed to death by Israel. Scumbag prick Bill Clinton, a fucking piece of shit George W. Bush, an arrogant scumbag lying shithead Nobel Peace of Crap Prize winner who lied his way into office, Barack Obama. Assad has to go. Gaddafi has to go. Yeah. Trump ramping up the war with Venezuela, blowing out the general in Iran, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And now bullshit Biden, a warmongering prick who got 5 draft deferments and loves war. And his 5th draft deferment, he got asthma, but brags about what a great athlete he was when he was in college. These are the people in charge. So should I be persecuted for their crimes? I'm warning the Jewish people, you are going to be persecuted for the crimes of the leaders in charge. This guy, Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, God gave us this land. No, he didn't. Again, wrote about it in detail, the Balfour Agreement in 1917, when the slimy limeys, the murderous fucking British, where the sun never set on the British Empire, created this fucking shit. When they invented this with the UN in 1948. When they threw some 700,000 Palestinians out in 1949. Another 700 thrown out in the 1967 Israeli war. Again, Israel is in total violation of the United Nations and the Geneva Conventions with its occupation of stolen land. If we don't have peace on earth, it's going to be hell on earth.
Joe Rogan notes the Canadian situation where podcasts are being controlled in extraordinary ways under some sort of patriotic hue, extraordinarily, is to promote Canadian content and to control all content. The EU has written to Elon Musk in a sort of weird, threatening, bureaucratic, gangster way, saying he better control his platform, otherwise they'll control that platform for him. And you know that the British government literally wrote to all social media platforms demanding they demonetize our content. So what's happening with this globalist crackdown on free speech? What are they afraid of? What are they trying to stop? And what are we going to do together to oppose them? Let's have a look first of all at Joe Rogan talking about new Canadian censorship laws that allow them to control podcasts in ways that are extraordinary and even know who's listening to particular podcasts. I don't know how this kind of legislation keeps getting passed and we're continually told it's like for the good of free speech and it's somehow liberal. It's not liberal to try and control everyone and everything all the time.
They're regulating podcasts in Canada.
They then want them to hand over information about their content and the people listening.
You can't have, that's dictatorship stuff. That's what that is. It's Banana Republic stuff.
We've talked about that raft of legislation in Canada and the various other ways that they're trying to create some sort of bizarre, new, brave, new tyranny by censorship and revoking people's licenses to practice psychotherapy. Obviously, Jordan Peterson's who I specifically mean there, as well as new measures that allow banks to kick people out of it. I mean, it's just all extraordinary. And it's not happening in a sort of disparate and isolated way. It seems concerted. Do you think this is coordinated? How do you think these things happen? Do you think they come from centralist organisations? How do these new legislature get simultaneously passed in concert? How is it happening? Let me know in the chat. The European Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton, has sent letters to Mark Zuckerberg of Meta and Elon Musk at X, demanding they comply with the EU's sweeping new internet regulation, the Digital Services Act. It's sweeping.
Good afternoon. As the war in Israel and Gaza is playing out right now in real time across social media, experts are telling us that bad information and propaganda are spreading on X.
Bad information and propaganda are spreading on X.
That was bad intelligence. Very bad intelligence.
I'm sorry.
Do you believe that they mean bad information and propaganda, or do you think it's possible they mean information they'd prefer you not to have access to, potentially because it gives you ammunition for critiques against establishment interests? Do you think that the role of the legacy media is to amplify and normalise the agenda of the powerful? And the problem they have with social media is that it can't be meaningfully regulated because attractive, appealing, well-put counter-narratives, whether they're true or not true, can succeed in online spaces. I don't think they care about truth. I think they care about control.
In large part, formerly known as Twitter, of course.
We all have to say formerly known, don't we? We can't get into the habit of just saying X.
Now, the research group Alethea detected a network of at least 67 accounts that posted false content about the war, and they've gotten millions of views. And researchers have not identified who is behind these accounts.
Another way that the current escalating conflict in the Middle East is being being exploited is with calls for censorship. Any crisis that occurs will now be utilised to create authoritarian measures. I don't consent to this degree of interventionism. Why is this not being communicated? Why is this not being discussed? Big tech companies themselves recognise that they're going to have to come to some sort of alliance with governments, otherwise they're going to be taxed differently, regulated differently, and they're not going to get those lucrative defence contracts. So they're gonna ultimately comply. One of the major subplots of the new censorship industrial complex era involves the lead role Europe has assumed in implementing draconian speech laws. Its leaders opining with imperious certainty that its restrictive conceptions of speech will be brought to the United States, whether we like it or not.
Because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the US. I think that
calls for greater censorship come at the same time that the Macron government has passed a new law allowing police to spy on people by secretly taking control of their phones and laptop computers and activating the microphone, camera and GPS. Well, at least they've passed the law for it now, rather than just doing it, which is what we all suspect they've been doing for a very long while. I, though, am still staggered by that. Years after Snowden's revelations, am I an idiot? I'm plainly, because I'm just like, no. Have they actually just, revolutionary France with its fraternity and its liberté, now I'm taking control of your microphone, The government says a judge will have to approve all spying. Phew! What a relief. Well done, Gilets Jaunes. Your movement and your protests at BlackRock have finally paid off. They won't be turning on your microphone unless a judge who works for the government approves of their spying. Night then, see you in the morning. Wait a minute, what if we can't trust anyone? But it is reasonable to worry about abuses of power, I'd say. In 2013, military contractor Edward Snowden revealed mass US government spying without a warrant. The British Parliament has passed legislation that will allow the government to spy on private and encrypted text messages. They're doing this right now. I mean, God, oh no! The Irish Senate is expected to pass legislation that will allow the police to enter homes without a warrant and search phones and laptops for evidence of hate speech. And Australia is on the cusp of passing a new law that would require social media companies to remove any speech that causes harm to health or the environment. Health and the environment, that's what people mean by vague. Like, on one hand, it seems like, well, yeah, you should be able to harm people's health or harm the environment. Agreed. But the environment means everything, and health means everything, which would allow government censorship of criticisms of its climate and energy policies. But they wouldn't use it like that, would they? Of course, the elite's crackdowns wouldn't be happening were the French, Irish and British governments more popular. Macron has a 25% approval rating and a 70% disapproval rating. Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has 35% approval and 52% disapproval, and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has 31% approval and 59% disapproval rating. Mad, unpopular leaders making mad, unpopular choices.
You run your mouth and I run my business, brother. You tell everybody I'm busted. You talk so much you got me disgusted. But you run your mouth and I run my business, brother.
This was from The Week magazine. Let's read the one line. Israel said an errant missile fired by a second Palestinian military group hit the facility. Israel's claiming that there's a second Palestinian militant group, and they're the ones that struck at it. And if that's true, it sounds like Israel better figure out how to get along with some Hamas, because there's some other group out there that's just blowing up the hospitals. Remember as we were talking about what are they going to do if you ended up with some sort of a crazy power vacuum? Well, apparently Hamas is the better of the two militant groups, because the other one will just fire the missiles at the hospitals. Or isn't that convenient? All of a sudden there's a third person to blame. They got bored of blaming each other, and now there's some third group that you can just point fingers to. But, Biden's over there, voice of reason in the room, just letting that it appears to be the other team. I love that. We supposedly the best intelligence in the entire world, and what we can come up with is that it appears to be the other team. And, it's nice that everyone is just viewing this as team sports at this point. So gag orders, I believe, they limit your ability to talk about court cases. And to me, they're the highest magnitude of bullshit. They make zero sense other than as a way for corrupt courses to hide their own corruption. Because let's say you were a magnificent restaurant with beautiful food. Would you ban Instagram bitches from coming in there and taking pictures of the beautiful food that they're not going to eat? You've got amazing food in your restaurant. Would you want people to not take pictures and post that food online? Is that the way you would operate? You go, hey, I cooked that steak to perfection. You don't take a picture of that thing. Why don't these courts have confidence in what they're doing that they would want it publicized? Why is it that you will do exactly what your business is, which is allotting out justice, but you won't let people talk about it? Unless it's that you don't feel good about what you're doing and you know that you're involved in corruption. And so part of the way of hiding your corruption is not allowing people to talk. How are gag orders not against, your right for free speech? How do you end up in a court case that the government can just bring a faulty court case about you, and then you're not allowed to speak out against the process? And then, of course, the move that the government pulls is they go, well, we're just concerned for us. That's what they always do. We have concerns for our safety. Your words might lead to violence. Your this might lead to that. And so as concerns for the court, I don't understand. So you work in government, you're a fan of this entire governmental system, you're a fan of our justice system, you're a fan of the cops, and yet you're so afraid that the fact that you work in a court, you can't be protected by any of the system that you seem to stand for someone to be able to just talk about what's going on in that courtroom, because the freedom that you have would somehow get in the way of my safety. All right, so let's take a look at some of the quotes from this. The order restricts Trump's ability to publicly target court personnel, potential witnesses, or the special counsel and his staff. The order did not impose restrictions on disparaging comments about Washington, D.C., where the jury will take place, or certain comments about the Justice Department at large, both of which the government requested. This is not about whether I like the language Mr. Trump uses, Judge Tanya Chutkan said. This is about language that represents a danger to the administration of justice. Where's the court for that? Where's the other court case of what exactly is the danger to the administration of justice? What does that mean? You're in court. No one else is in the court. You're running the court. It's you and the jury. What exactly is the danger to the administration of justice? Firstly, can you define what the fuck that means? And then is there going to be some sort of other court case and where you have to actually prove that certain activities are a danger to the administration of justice? Where's that court case on what activities are specifically a dangers to the administration of justice? All right, this is still from CNN. When you start using a word like thug to describe a prosecutor doing their job, that wouldn't be allowed by any other criminal defendant, Chutkan said. Just because the defendant is running a political campaign does not allow him to do whatever he wants. She added, if the message Mr. Trump wants to express is my prosecution is politically motivated, he can do so without using highly charged language. Isn't this great? Basically, the judge is going, you know what? I'm going to teach Trump how to be boring. We've all said that we don't like the way that this guy talks. We don't like the language that how is this not censorship? How is that not a violation of someone's right to free speech? You're actually not even saying that he's not allowed to say that this isn't corruption. You're just policing the way that he wants to say it, because if it's charged language, if it's charged, wait, you're saying if he actually cares about this and uses language that might cultivate public support for him because what you're doing is fraudulent, he can't sell it. That's really what you're saying. He's allowed to have this point of view. He just needs to be boring with it, and he can't really actually sell it for public support. How is that not censorship? All right, I believe this might be from a different source. I don't think this is still from CNN, but I forgot to mark it. Trump earlier posted a fundraising pitch there before Chutka's really saying they decided to try and forcibly silence me, and by extension our movement, by imposing a court-sanctioned gag order upon me. Laura made a similar point in court, saying the Biden administration is seeking to censor a political candidate in the middle of a campaign. Even if Trump turns out to be guilty, I feel like that's a pretty fair claim. You get the Justice Department's bringing court cases against you while you're running for president. You should be allowed to talk about that. In fact, if you're not allowed to talk about that, that probably needs to be corrected, because otherwise you're opening up a huge pathway to corruption where the incumbent party might as well do whatever it can to bring false cases against you because they have the resources to do so. Worst case scenario, you get saddled with lawyer fees, you have to go to court a whole bunch of times, and if you're not even allowed to talk about the fact that it's corrupt, then I guess you're instantly guilty if you even say, hey, what the other side's doing is unfair.
Yeah, nobody knows who bombed the hospital. It's the only Christian hospital in Gaza. The scenes were horrific last night. And I think, people's minds were probably made up at the beginning. If they support one side or the other, they won't believe the other stories. So what we don't know, and we won't know because propaganda takes over immediately. And all sides use it in war. But there are a couple of interesting things. The Israelis were caught editing some video. They put out some video proving that it was not them. And there's a little timestamp that they had actually made that video about 30 minutes after the attack. So they had edited some video doing that. They also released what they purported to be a phone call between two Hamas agents discussing the fact that it was their own bomb that hit it, and they were roasted on Twitter over that because they say, you have the technology to listen to two guys from Hamas talking about this bomb, but you couldn't detect a whole year of them planning this huge attack? Give me a break. So they really got roasted over that. So we don't know what happened with the horrific bomb, but it did, as you say in your opener, it really did coalesce the entire, as if they needed another event. It coalesced in even somewhere like Jordan, where they try to be a close U.S. partner, and we'll talk about this later, their leadership had to react. So in the midst of all this horror, here's Biden saying, I'm going to go take a trip over there and solve the problems. Put on this first clip because it is a disaster for him, I would say, and for his whole team. Biden in Israel agrees with Netanyahu. Looks like the other team did it. So, this This trip was scheduled to be something very, very different, Dr. Paul. This was, and I'm sure the people at the State Department, the people around him, the people in the White House, they had all the optics down. Biden was going to swoop in. He's going to meet Netanyahu. They're going to have a nice hug. They're going to talk about how much we're going to support them. But in a twist, then he's going to have a summit in Jordan with a bunch of Arab leaders. So it's going to show like he's taking an even hand, an even approach. He's a peacemaker. He's trying to solve the problem. Well, this bombing of the hospital was basically a bombing of his trip. And as a result, the other side, the Arab side, said, we're not going to have a summit. We don't want to meet with you. We don't want to talk to you. And so it was an absolute disaster. And so with that happening, it left this next picture is basically the entirety of his trip, which is him sitting in a weird room with Netanyahu covered by Israeli and American flags. This is exactly the opposite image the U.S. would want to have out if it's trying to make the case that we are an honest broker here. So I don't know if the Israelis are happy with this or if Netanyahu is happy with this, but this is definitely not the look Biden was going for.
I wanted to mention, some of the downturns about, economics and all, but what about the downturns under these situations of civil liberties?
Yeah.
There's a worldwide effort, including in the United States, with Patriot Act and more attack on people who might have an opinion that might lead to a crime. They might be terrorists, and who knows? And yet they themselves and the government that's doing this, they're closer to could be defined as a terrorist than somebody that speaks out. So the potential terrorist is somebody now that talks, and it just, sorts it out and tries to be fair-minded and look at both sides of it. And this, I just want to mention, the ex-UK, he's not a diplomat right now, Craig Murray, but he's well known.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But he took a real strong position for the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
Should that be a crime? I mean, he was withheld, but I think he said he was already in prison one time, too.
Yeah, he had been, for thought crimes as well. He's not only on the Palestinian, but he's also very big on releasing Assange. And so I think those two things are sore spots. And so they detained him. He didn't hurt anyone. No, he had the wrong thoughts and detained him.
You would think we'd get some benefits, when we have a president that's having a little trouble with his faculties. Maybe he'll just, take care of Assange and let him go.
Yeah, I don't know.
Give him a pardon. What are you going to pardon him for? What did he do?
Yeah, exactly.
When people mingle and come together voluntarily, most likely they're going to be a lot less eager to fight and kill their neighbors. But when the government gets involved, when they have control of the propaganda machine, and that is, silence the people who are telling the truth and let them hear only the lies about why to do this. But of course, we pointed out here that already that people aren't buying all these lies, in Ukraine or in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Freedom is popular, and it brings people together. And that's what some people don't understand. It's the government that separates us. People say, oh, no, government is so necessary. You can't be against the government. You'd be not patriotic. You got to do this and that. But no, they want you to follow the rules, and they really don't believe in personal relationships. They say, you guys don't even want any government. I'll tell you what. From my viewpoint, we have the best government, and the government is real close to home. It could be the state, it could be the city, it could be the county, but it could be your household, it could be your parents, and you have rules, to get around all the nonsense. And yet, right now, I mean, do you think with the stories we hear now, what goes on in public schools, it's getting attention, and that's good. But that is just terrible, because most of those problems, the moral, attitude that is expressed in our schools is so bad, but it's ignored. So I think government is very important. I think ultimately, though, not only is it your family, your friends, and your church that might guide you in the morality, the ultimate responsibility falls on us. And under those conditions, we can't defer. Oh, well, I had a bad time. This has happened. I will go to the government. The government will take care of me. Well, why don't you go to your neighbor? Oh, no, he might shoot me if I take what I want. But I'll send my congressman over there to do it. So it's a basic moral principle of minding our own business and not interfering with the rights and the privileges and the liberties of other people. I'll tell you what, we would have a freer and more prosperous world if we just got going in that direction. It would be so overwhelmingly beneficial.